Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Talk of the Town podcast. If you have not already, make sure to hit that subscribe button, as we're now on the road to 400 subscribers here on the YouTube channel. If you love sports content, sports talk, anything from sports betting to updated rankings every week, it's all right here on the Talk of the Town podcast. And here today, we have Top 10 Tuesday. If you're not familiar with Top 10 Tuesday here on the YouTube channel, at the end of every NFL week, we re-rank the top 10 teams and QBs after that week. And we also have some other things to talk about here in this video as well. Starting off with the Cowboys and Raiders Monday Night Football game from last night. The Cowboys getting a big-time win over the Raiders. Just pretty dominant all around the board, offense, defense. They're painting it on Jerry Jones up there. He looks pretty ecstatic. And honestly, the defense, a big trade they made in Quinnen Williams a couple weeks ago. He had, a sack and a half, 2 sacks last night or something like that. He looked really good. The whole defense kind of looked rejuvenated last night. They looked really good, even though the Raiders are pretty horrible all around the board, offensively and defensively. But regardless, this Cowboys defense hasn't really been able to stop a nosebleed all season, no matter who they've gone against. So a good sign there for the Cowboys, pointing in the right direction. They're trying to climb back here in this NFC playoff race. What are they, 4-5-1 now, I believe? Yep. So they're trying to climb back in that race. I still think that tie from the Packers is going to haunt them all season. I don't necessarily think this team is quite good enough to be a playoff team just yet, but they're definitely trending in the right direction. I mentioned at the beginning of the season, before the season even started with the Cowboys, that this team would be a roller coaster. They had a couple of weeks there, I think before the bye week, that this team looked really kind of dead in the water. I mean, they even on offense, which has really been their heartbeat, their heart and soul of the team, because their defense, as I mentioned, it just can't stop anything, to be honest with you, no matter who they play against. But their offense, Schottenheimer, who people were kind of slamming at the beginning of the season, his play calling has been pretty elite, to be honest with you. This offense all year has just looked really good. Pickens is kind of like the wide receiver one there now. He's kind of taken over the role for CeeDee Lamb, but that 1-2 punch with Lamb and Pickens has been pretty great. So he's really utilizing that well. Their running game, which I thought would be an issue with Javonte Williams and those guys back there, they've looked really good, to be honest with you. They have. So I think the Cowboys' offense is not the issue. It's been their defense, but their defense, as I mentioned, they made a big trade for Quinnen Williams, Jerry Jones. Kind of a mixed bag there, kind of taking some heat. Some other people were like, hey, you got to do what you got to do. You said you were going to make a big trade. You did it for a pretty elite pass rusher. And, of course, you had the people sitting there saying, like, you sit there, you trade a first-round pick or so to get Quinnen Williams, but you could have just signed Michael Parsons to a bunch of money. You had an elite pass rusher who Michael Parsons, a lot of people would say, probably include myself, is better than Quinnen Williams. But, you signed him, you got him. You definitely have an elite pass rusher now. So, again, he looked really good last night. Again, with the Jets all season, Quinnen Williams didn't really do much, but that goes to show you, no matter who really is playing for the Jets this season, kind of just shows that if they were to go anywhere else, not necessarily everybody, they'd have another sign of life there. But good win there for the Cowboys. As I mentioned, their defense kind of looked rejuvenated last night. I don't care whether or not it's against this Raiders offense, which isn't great. It's a good sign that things are definitely going in the right direction here for the Cowboys. But the Raiders, just seems like it kind of gets worse every week for Las Vegas at this point. One of the things that's kind of starting to spiral around now in the media, and I actually made a video on it last week, is the Pete Carroll hiring is starting to look really bad. I actually liked the hiring at first. I actually liked their team more in general at the beginning of the season, especially, they had that win against New England at the beginning of the year. Geno Smith had almost like 400 yards passing or something in that game. Now, mind you, there was no Christian Gonzalez in that game. They're undefeated when Gonzalez plays. But regardless, Geno, the offense looked good. The defense even looked good against the Patriots. Again, I always say the first week or two of the season is always very weird. And for the Raiders, that has been the case. They've only had one win since. They're at 2-8 right now. One of the things I thought with Pete Carroll when they hired him is I thought the roster was better than they really are. Their roster clearly has a lot of holes, and they're just not very good. I thought he'd bring some sort of stability to this team. So far in his first year, that just has not been the case. Like, this team looks kind of worse than they did last year, to be honest with you. And they picked like 6 overall, I think, or something this year. And speaking of picking 6 overall, Ashton Genty had 2 carries by halftime, or 2 carries at halftime last night. I just think that's atrocious. And speaking of Pete Carroll and his hirings, he's always been kind of questionable with his hirings anyway. If you look through his career, he's made a lot of firings, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And I think it almost feels inevitable at this point that Chip Kelly is going to be fired by the end of this year. I thought it was very questionable when they hired Chip Kelly anyway, but I was like, you know what? Maybe he knows what he's doing. Maybe he sees something we don't. Yeah, clearly not. Chip Kelly's just kind of always been how he is in the NFL. This has just been a disaster. This Raiders offense seems to just really regress, and the team in general. I just think now, kind of looking on it now that we're 11, 12 weeks into the season, this whole Pete Carroll hiring for the Raiders is just very weird. The timeline doesn't really match. I think after this season, look, I know Crosby, like Derek Carr, like those guys bleed silver and black and silver, whatever it is, they bleed that. Like, there's very few players who play for bad organizations that really enjoyed playing there. Like guys like Khalil Mack, Amari Cooper, like those guys couldn't have gotten out of Las Vegas fast enough when they were there, right? But you have guys like Max Crosby, even like Derek Carr, they bleed black and silver. They love being there. But at some point, you kind of have to look around and be like, is it really worth keeping Max Crosby at this point? As much as this guy loves being here, there's a lot of real estate in Las Vegas. You know, he loves it here, loves the organization. We love having a player like that. But we have to look for our future in general. And Max Crosby for the next, let's say for the Raiders organization in general, this team is not going to be good for the next 4 or 5 years. Maybe not necessarily that long, but kind of what gives you hope. I mean, they've had like 2 winning seasons in the last 20 years or something like that, seriously. And I was pretty shocked when I seen that. I actually seen that graphic, I think it was like a month or so ago, and I thought the Raiders were a little bit better than that. I mean, I know the organization has really been there with like the Browns. I mean, they're not good. The organization is just not good in general. And you have to start looking, and it's like, as much as this guy loves being there, at the end of the day, it's a business. Like, they could trade Max Crosby and at least get a first-round pick, maybe 2 first-round picks. Like, if Sauce Gardner was a first-round pick, well, I think it was 2 first-round picks for Sauce Gardner. Max Crosby might be 3 first-round picks. And you just seen that unravel 2 weeks ago with the Sauce Gardner trade with the Jets and the Colts. Imagine there's very few elite edge rushers in this league, and he's one of them. I mean, he's like number 2 or number 3 in this league. And every team in the NFL, I don't care, Cleveland with Myles Garrett, they're going to look for another pass rusher. It doesn't matter. So there's always a market there. You're going to have to look for your future. And I think that being said I'd look at trading Crosby. I can't imagine he's there in the next year or two. I think they're going to look at that situation. He's really, no matter how good or how dominant he is, it's not doing any good for them. You can say the same thing with Myles Garrett. Look at how freaking dominant he's been, especially over the last couple of weeks. He's had like 10 sacks in 3 weeks, and they've lost every single game just about. Yeah, I think they have lost every game. They lost to New York. They lost to New England. They lost last week or a couple days ago to the Ravens. It's just a mess. It's a mess in Cleveland. So I'd say the same with Crosby. Like, ship him off. Get a couple of first-round picks, which you know you can. And I'd say the same for Pete Carroll. Is like, the timeline just doesn't fit. That just doesn't. This team isn't a year or 2 or even 3 or 4 years away from contending at all. And you have someone who's going to be turning 75 years old next year. And, I mean, you figure by the end of it, if they can even contend in 4 years, which knowing the Raiders, you don't even know whether or not they can. He's going to was 80 years old. Like, is this guy still going to have it? Is his mind going to be in the right place? People are even questioning now, and even his last few years in Seattle. Mind you, this guy took a break from coaching last year, whether or not this guy still had it coaching-wise. I don't know. I think the Pete Carroll hiring, I understand. I don't actually blame the Raiders for trying to get an experienced head coach, try getting some sort of stability in the organization. But when you look at it now, he's really old. He just is. He doesn't necessarily look it. He looked how he did 5-10 years ago, to be honest with you. Like, he does look good. But when you have an old guy back there who was known in Seattle for his last couple of years or so, the last 5 years or so in Seattle, of running an outdated scheme, even as guys, look at Seattle now, 2 years out of Pete Carroll. They're flourishing. I know they just lost against the Rams a couple days ago, but they were well within that game and just missed a game-winning kick. They're flourishing without Pete Carroll. They didn't take any steps back. Even the year Pete Carroll left and they hired Mike Macdonald, they went 10-7 and just missed the playoffs with Geno Smith. I mean, they really were still a really good team. They just missed the playoffs and were well over 500. So they haven't missed a beat. The Seahawks are 7-3 right now. I think the Raiders, we got to just move off. None of it fits. It's just really weird. Again, Genty with 2 carries at halftime. He just spent a 6th-round pick on this guy. Like, really? I think he had 6 carries all game. Hold on, let me check. I have the stat line. At least I had the stat line right here. Let me see. 1 sec. Genty for the game, 6 carries for 7 yards. And you just spent a borderline top 5 pick on this guy less than a year ago. And it hasn't really worked out for him all season. And I don't necessarily think it's his fault. He's a bruising back. I mean, you look at him, he really just trucks guys over. He breaks a lot of tackles. He's been very good at what he does. He's not known necessarily as an explosive runner, but he's shifty. He breaks guys off, breaks a lot of tackles, and just inches yards after yards after yards. He's almost a guy who feels like you can get a guaranteed yard or 2 with him. If you're 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, you just call Genty back there and he'll get it done. I know he did get tackled for that safety, but that play just got completely blown up, and that was really just wraps at that point. But the whole hiring with Chip Kelly, which, again, I mentioned earlier in the video, you look at Pete Carroll's career and his resume as a coach in terms of his firings as well, it almost feels like 100% Chip Kelly is going to be out as a Las Vegas Raiders offensive coordinator. I get it. Look, the Raiders felt kind of desperate coming into this offseason. Like, hey, we traded for Geno. We gave him a little bit of an extension, which I felt like a Pete Carroll move. Again, that was Pete Carroll's guy his last few years there in Seattle. And that just hasn't worked. Geno Smith has just been one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. And as you look at moves like that, and it's just like, what are we doing? I mean, seriously. So the Raiders, I think you had to look at parting ways with him after this season. If they don't, they at least have to ponder the idea. They do. And I think they will. I do think, especially if the season ends out with them, I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders got only 1 more win this season. I do think they're at least going to get another win or so, but they're going to probably finish with maybe 3 or 4 wins all season. They're going to have a really high pick, and you look at getting high draft picks. And as I mentioned with the timeline, none of it just fits for Pete Carroll. And do you really want him in his stat picking high? Because they drafted Genty, and clearly they're not even really utilizing him, to be honest with you. It just kind of seems like a waste of a pick to this point in his rookie year. I'm not saying Genty's a bad player, but I'm saying for the organization and the way they're using him, clearly he does not fit what they want to use. At least so far in his rookie year. Maybe it'll change. But I feel this whole thing's about to blow up in Las Vegas. They shipped off Jacoby Myers. Hell, I wouldn't even be surprised they look at shipping off Brock Bowers at some point. Not next year per se, but maybe in the last year of his contract, depending on where this team is at. This team might look at shipping off everybody and just completely blowing it up. So we'll see. I don't necessarily know if that's in the works, but I think the Max Crosby thing and the Pete Carroll thing is real, especially after last night's game. That was just embarrassing. I mean, that's really been their whole season in a nutshell. They had that game a few weeks ago against Jacksonville. They kind of looked like they were in it, ended up losing in overtime. The Raiders just aren't going anywhere. They're definitely not trending in the right direction. So, yeah, that's really all I got to say about that. Top 10 Tuesday here. Let's start off with the top 10 teams. We're going to start off with an honorable mention here with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A couple teams that were close to being only honorable mentions were the Pittsburgh Steelers. And yeah, actually, that's really about it. That's all I got on my honorable mentions there. But, and the Packers. Yeah, the Packers were pretty close on the honorable mentions as well, but they had to show a little bit more, kind of like get their foot on the gas pedal. Not going to take one win over the Giants as being like, hey, the Packers are back. They still were a little concerning in that game. But I do have the Bucs. I know the Bucs have dropped a couple of games now against the Pats, the Bills. One thing that the AFC East has done to the NFC South is they have really kind of just owned that division. Patriots swept. I know the Bills lost against the Falcons, but they really kind of just went all in. The Dolphins beat the Falcons. The AFC East just kind of just went in and just kind of beat the shit out of the NFC South so far this season. I noticed that. So that's not necessarily just a Buccaneers trend. That's really almost the entire division. But yeah, the Bucs, look, they're getting their guys back. I was debating on like, hey, if Godwin and Irving weren't necessarily on a good timeline to come back, I probably wouldn't have the Bucs on the honorable mention right now. But it's likely that Bucky Irving and Chris Godwin come back this week. And I feel like if Irving and Godwin were playing against the Pats a couple weeks ago, I think the Buccaneers win that game. I really do. It just looks like they're still good and they're very close in these games, and their offense has been fine, but they're missing their main guy still. They're missing Evans, who is supposedly might come back here soon. Godwin and Irving, I mentioned, might come back here in a couple or this week. So that's the reason why I got them back. When they get those guys back, this team's going to get back to winning games. They just are. They've been close. They've been close contests in these games, even without them anyway. So, and I think they're only going to take that next step and get even better. So I think the Bucs are definitely in a good spot. Even though they've lost a couple of games, they're getting their guys back, and they stay in the honorable mention spot for me. Number 10, dropping down 5 spots, I have the Detroit Lions. Look, pretty bad loss against the Eagles. They didn't get blown out. We know it was close, but bad fourth down calls, just a lot of missed opportunities on fourth down. Their offense looks shut down. Now, I'm not necessarily going to dock. I mean, I did dock them a good bit of points. They dropped down 5 spots, but the Eagles defense has been pretty fantastic, especially over the last month or so. So, again, they didn't drop a dud to the Raiders defense or the Dolphins defense or something like that. Just not a good defense in general. The Eagles defense is one of the best units in the league so far this week, going into week 12 so far. So, yeah, I'm going to give the Lions some sort of credit there, but they just didn't look good. And I think one thing with the Lions is that they're going to drop some duds this season. I think they're going to drop at least like 2 more of those. I think this team's going to finish around like 11-6. So, and that kind of feels like a borderline top 10 team, man. They feel like that, but when we know how their offense looks like when they're moving, I think they're missing Laporta on IR, so I think they'll be fine, but they definitely dropped down. They just didn't look good in that Eagles game at all. Number 9, on this list here this week, the San Francisco 49ers. Look, they've been dealing with a bunch of injuries. I think their defense is going to suffer a lot from these injuries, especially against better teams. The Arizona Cardinals, not necessarily the best team in the world. They got smoked by the Seahawks the week before they played against the 49ers last week, but Brock Purdy looked really good. Their offense is starting to get healthy, which is a good sign. And as long as their defense can kind of just play average, to be honest with you, I think this team can make some noise. I don't think this team is a Super Bowl team by any stretch. Again, when you're missing Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, like those are just 2 big-time guys to lose, especially when you're losing them all year. There's no chance they're going to get them back this year. Those are big losses. Those are way too big to lose. I mean, it's not like you're losing, a guy who's just, we can maybe throw in a second string. If he can fill in that role just a little bit, it'll be okay. You're not going to have guys replace those 2 guys' roles at all. So I think that's going to come back to bite them a little bit. But the way they're playing right now, their offense is getting healthy. Their offenses look good. I stick them at number 9, man. I have to give them credit there. The 49ers at 9. Number 8, again, another new team on this list, the Chicago Bears at number 8. I was kind of debating on flip-flopping them and the 49ers, but I like the Bears' health a little more right now. But I think, look, the Bears on a heater right now. They're on a win streak. Things are trending up for the Bears. They look really good. Again, Caleb kind of seems to be getting better every week. Would like to see him be a little more consistent, of course. I've been kind of preaching that all year with Caleb. It's like, while this team has been winning games and Caleb's been good on late game heroics, his consistency throughout the game is still kind of all over the place. But nonetheless, he's showing his potential. He's looked really good in these games. He's pretty much unsackable. The defense looks good. Ben Johnson and his play calls, man. Manungai, I think that's how you pronounce his name. DeAndre Swift, their run games look fantastic. Colson Loveland's kind of breaking onto the scene there in Chicago. So definitely have to give them credit here. Put them at number 8. They're on a heater right now, and I like the Bears. Whether or not this team can win a playoff game or not is very much up in the air. I don't know. A lot of inexperienced, coaches between Ben Johnson, of course. He's not necessarily inexperienced in the playoffs in terms of a coordinator, but being a head coach is a different story in terms of being in the playoffs. So And Williams, incredibly inexperienced in that spot. So, and a lot of the other players on that team as well. So, yeah, I got the Bears at number 8. So, in number 7, I have the Buffalo Bills moving up 3 spots from number 10. Josh Allen with a big-time performance, 3 touchdowns, passing, 3 touchdowns, rushing. Look, their defense did put up, or they let up over 30 points against Baker and the Bucs. But, you know, the only issue I've had is their defense really all year. Their offense looked better. They did make Keon Coleman a healthy scratch, which I thought was interesting. Their offense looked better without him in it. At the beginning of the game, I was like, Josh Allen threw 2 picks. He was like 5 for 11 passing. I was like, oh, God. The Bills got some real issues, but they turned it on. Looked like vintage Buffalo, and they steamrolled over the Bucs, a good team. So definitely got to give them credit there. James Cook. You kind of look at the Bills, and it's like, who's their second best player besides Josh Allen? Dawkins, what the left tackle? James Cook. I mean, and Josh Allen's really putting on a show there in Buffalo. And only thing that worries me about Buffalo is when they get in January, which they're going to get there, no doubt. There's going to be a Josh Allen reliant game again where he has to play Superman. That's when they find themselves losing games. And that's the only worry I have with them. Number 6, got the Indianapolis Colts coming off a bye week. Look, not too much to talk about there. Team on a bye. Jonathan Taylor, been fantastic all year. The Daniel Jones fumbling issues are worrisome because he's kind of had them his whole career to this point. And when they come along, Daniel Jones starts fumbling a lot, and he did it against Atlanta, and he did it against Pittsburgh. So have to keep an eye out for that. But Sauce Gardner trade, looked good against Atlanta. Travarius Ward, we're going to be alongside next to him here, coming up here soon. So looks like things are only trending in the right direction for the Colts. They got some nice rest. Number 5, I have the Seattle Seahawks moving down 3 spots from number 2. Look, they almost ended up winning that game, which was pretty crazy, even after a really bad performance by Sam Darnold. Look, the only reason why I dropped them down so much is because these other teams ended up winning above them. And one of those teams, ended up beating the Seahawks. I'm sure you guys knew they were there anyway. But, you end up coming off of a loss to bad turnovers. A thing I mentioned with the Seahawks, why I didn't have them ranked over the Rams last week, is in big spots, which this was a big spot for the Seahawks this week. Yeah, Sam Darnold ended up throwing a bunch of turnovers. He ended up losing the turnover battle, and he's a big play quarterback. You know, what do you expect? But at the same time, you can't end up having that many turnovers. It was just felt like one after another at some point. I like the experience more of the Rams, and, the Seahawks, again, with Mike McDonald. Look, their defense is fantastic. Their offense is fantastic as well. The only issue I have is the turnovers. And they still almost won that game, which is pretty incredible. But they're still a top 5 team, and I think the Seahawks are. I think maybe they needed a game like this, to be honest with you. Like, a lot of people have them ranked number 1 in their power rankings, and it was like, hey, we still got issues. We now know our issues, and we know when we go against a really good team in big spots what to do. I actually think this was a good experience for Seattle going forward, to be honest with you. Number 4, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. Look, I've had them ranked number 9, 8, kind of 7 the last couple of weeks. Look, they keep winning games. I don't care how bad their offense has looked. The Broncos' offense hasn't necessarily looked great either. They keep winning games. So, Eagles' defense has really stepped up for this offense. Again, the Eagles' offense with Kevin Patullo does worry me, to be honest with you, in the long run. But a lot of star-studded players with A.J. Brown. You had that whole drama with him on the Madden stream like last week or a couple weeks ago or some shit like that. There is some drama there on offense. Saquon Barkley just hasn't looked as good, which is kind of scary, to be honest with you. I don't think he's on pace for 1,000 yards this season. So that's something to keep an eye out on. But Eagles, they're not turning the ball over. They're playing safe football. They're winning games. They're doing what they have to do to win. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. Again, they still have one of the best rosters in the league. They can find that spark on offense. This team would be number 1, like that, to be honest with you. So, they just got to find that spark on offense because their defense is clicking, but their offense isn't quite there. Number 3, coming off of a massive win, not just for them, but for the entirety of their division, the Denver Broncos over the weekend against the Kansas City Chiefs, knocking the Chiefs out of the playoff picture, which they haven't been in the last couple of weeks. maybe kind of putting a dagger in the Chiefs season. I mean, the Chiefs are well within the season, but if we get to the end of the year and Chiefs don't end up making the Chiefs don't end up making the playoffs, we're going to look back and say, damn, man, the Broncos really had something to say in that, especially in their division, man. The Broncos are in the driver's seat in the AFC West right now. Look, I just, their defense, this is without Stratain, by the way. Their offense, still some question marks on offense, whether or not Bo Nix can lead the charge in January, which I think the Broncos are a lock to be in the playoffs at this point. I mentioned they're in the driver's seat in the AFC West. Good week for them with a Chargers loss and Chiefs loss. Hell, the Raiders aren't in it, but the Raiders lost. So a really good week for Denver there. But their offense, look, hasn't necessarily played the best, but they made some big time throws. Bo Nix did. Looked a little more consistent going against the Chiefs this week. So it doesn't matter how you win. It just matters if you win. And they're winning games. I don't care if it's one-score games, which I think is the most important. You're not going to blow out teams in the playoffs. That's one of my biggest points with any team is like your ability to win one-score games is extremely important. That's why I have the Bears where they're at number 8. Because the Bears have been winning one-score games. It's kind of wondering, like, could the Bears maybe end up pulling off a win or two in the playoffs? Your ability to win one-score games in January is huge. So, and that's where the Broncos are going to be at. So I have them ranked at number 3. They've been fantastic. Number 2, I have the New England Patriots, flip-flopping between them and the Broncos, but I do like the way the Patriots offense has played better than the Broncos, and I do like the way their defense has been playing as well. Their secondary has been killer. The Gonzalez and Carlton Davis, too, has been fantastic. Only concern I have is Milton Williams is on IR, like their best defensive tackle. Just big splash move for them in the offseason. Spent a lot of money on him. He's been fantastic and a big part in why their run defense has been like the best in the NFL in like 50 years or something like that. Their run defense has been fantastic. He does go on IR with a high ankle sprain. That's really the only concern I have, though. But besides that, their pass rush been fantastic. I heard Kirk Herbstreit make a good point on Thursday Night Football last week when they were playing against the Jets. That a lot of their defensive line and a lot of their players on defense have been guys who have been cut at some point in their career. And I think that's led to a lot of guys kind of with a chip on their shoulder, to be honest with you. That's what their defense plays like. They're hard hitting. They're all over the place. They look pissed off. They're a ferocious unit. So, got to put the Patriots there. Their offense has been great. May's an MVP candidate. He's actually leading the MVP voting. So, just all around the board, they're killing it. Number 1, staying where they've been at the last couple of weeks now, is the Los Angeles Rams. Big showdown with the Seahawks. Ended up, their defense played fantastic. To me, they look like the fastest defense in the NFL. Their pass rushers, their corners, their linebackers, every unit just looks like they're flying all over the field. And I got to give them their respect. Stafford is playing, honestly, I think this is the best football Stafford's played in his career so far. He really is playing just fantastic. And it's led Sean McVay feels very comfortable in his play calling. They just look so comfortable out there. Like, they look confident. They look comfortable. They look really good. They do. They look like the best team in the NFL to me, and they just keep winning games. Definitely the best team in the NFC. I think they're the team to beat, not just in the NFC, but in the entirety of the NFL right now. They just look fantastic everywhere. So that's it for my top 10 teams. Let's move on to top 10 QBs here real quick. In my honorable mention spot, I have 2 of them, actually, not just one this time. I have Dak Prescott and Caleb Williams. Dak, look, he's been inconsistent for the last couple of weeks or so, but the performance he put up last night and the majority of the year, he's been like, I have had him ranked as high as like top 5 on my list. He had a couple of weeks there before their bye week where he didn't necessarily look great. Just the entire team was kind of trending downhill. But after, they had a pretty noisy trade deadline there, picked up Logan Wilson, Quinnen Williams. Look, I think it's kind of in their favor for both units, offense and defense. Dak's played great, had a great game last night, and he's had a really good season in general, besides those couple of games he had where he did play great. So have him there, climbing back in my honorable mentions. And Caleb, didn't necessarily have the best game in the world, but a late game heroics, good drive, lead him in field goal range, field goal position. I ended up kicking the game-winning field goal against the Vikings. Just seems unfazed and unbothered. That's pretty good for a guy who's only a year and a half into his career. So definitely have to give him that honorable mention spot there. Again, would like to see the consistencies or be a little more consistent, but I think that'll come in due time. So in number 10, I have Justin Herbert. He had a terrible performance against the Jacksonville Jaguars, like absolutely atrocious. I don't know if you've seen that. I think only like 80-some yards passing. He did take a couple shots. Trey Lance had to end up entering the game. I think he is like on the injury report. I don't know, but he took a couple of really big shots against Jacksonville. Had an interception. He just had probably one of, if not the worst game of his career. Whether or not that drops him off the list, no. Look, guys have duds. If he has another game like that, then there's a real cause for concern. But that Jacksonville team was just pumped all over the place. Offense, defense, they just looked like they were there to outplay the Chargers. And look, they did, man. I mean, Justin Herbert got beat like a damn drum out there. And look, he drops down to number 10. If he has another performance like that, he'll definitely be off the top 10 list. But he was number 7 last week, I think. But do have to drop him after a performance like that. And I think it's showing that he's missing his tackles back there. He just is. Joe Walton missing Slater for the year is just a brutal loss for him. Number 9, I have Sam Darnold, like a 4-interception performance. He was, number 6 last week on my list. That's bad, man. Four picks is definitely not something to write home about, but my concern with Darnold, and it's been like this all year, and why I've been hesitant to put him really high is, in high-pressure situations, can we trust Sam Darnold? And the answer right now is no. I didn't trust him last year in Minnesota, especially when they played against the Rams as well. Maybe the Rams is a script tonight. I don't know. They play against each other. I think it's week 18. It might be the last game of the year for them both. It's one of the last games of the year, I think, for those two teams. But one of my biggest concerns is trusting Sam Darnold in big spots. I think the Seahawks will make the playoffs, but can Sam Darnold keep the turnovers away and just make good passes and just keep the team up the field? He didn't end up doing that against the Rams. And meanwhile, as I mentioned earlier, they did almost end up winning that game. They just didn't look great, or Sam Darnold didn't look great in that game at all. They just had about anyone else there, they may have actually ended up winning that game. So do have to drop them down a decent bit there. Number 8, look, I have Jalen Hurts. I know their offense has been struggling. They've had the whole debacle with A.J. Brown and just kind of some drama on offense. But, look, one of the things with him is he has not been turning the ball over. He's been great with his legs. He's been inconsistent throwing the football, but when he needs a big throw, he makes it. Or when his team needs a big throw, he ends up making that throw for him and puts him in good position. So, look, he's clutch. Jalen Hurts, if anyone denies it, I don't know what to tell you. He is a clutch quarterback. He may not be necessarily the greatest quarterback in the world for the first 45 minutes, but when they need a throw from him, he ends up making it. If they need him to make a play with his legs, he ends up making it. So, yeah, man, I got Jalen Hurts at number 8. Real quick before I move on to number 7, actually, another point I wanted to make is that some people say with Jalen Hurts is like, well, he may not end up turning the ball over, but what does that matter when he's not doing a lot else otherwise, in terms of being able to score 30-plus points a game and win games when you have that much talent on offense? It just doesn't really seem like he's that good. Is he the one holding the team back? Look, you have a guy who doesn't throw a lot of turnovers in Justin Fields, and he just got benched yesterday. So just because you don't have to throw a lot of turnovers to, I don't know, I'm trying to word it better, but like Justin Fields doesn't throw a lot of turnovers and he sucks. So Jalen Hurts doesn't throw a lot of turnovers. He ends up winning games and he ends up putting up good stats regardless. Like Jalen Hurts to me is a lot better just than Justin Fields. And I think Justin Fields is more athletic. You look all over the board. Justin Fields realistically kind of should be the better quarterback. He has the better arm. I think he's a better scrambler. He's better with his legs. But Jalen Hurts, in terms of his IQ and his clutch ability, is that's why he's up there number 8 for me. This guy is a top 10 QB, and he's very clutch when they need him. Number 7, I have Jared Goff. Not the best performance against the Eagles. Maybe you could argue, well, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles just beat Goff and the Lions. Why in the hell is he not over Goff? Goff's just had a not a way better year, but he's had a better year, especially passing the football. He has been fantastic. He had a rough game against the Eagles a couple days ago on Sunday Night Football at prime time, but the Eagles defense has been a unit just to be messed with, to be reckoned with. It is a great unit, and really just had his number. He's missing Laporta. That's a security blanket. The fourth down calls are questionable, not just from him. It's nothing to do with Jared Goff, but from Dan Campbell. I think it ended up putting Goff in a bad spot. And just in general, Goff didn't have the greatest game in the world, but I think he's fine. He's had a good year all year, and I think we know there's limitations with Goff, but he's been fantastic all year. Number 6, I have Baker Mayfield. Look, he's lost his last couple of games, but he's been pretty good his last couple of games. Like, he has been pretty fantastic. They've asked Baker to put the team on his back. He's delivered. Now, they haven't necessarily won the games. The defense kind of choked on big-time drives, which, again, has nothing to do with Baker. But when they score, Baker ends up putting up a score. He's definitely been the guy for that. So, I think Baker's still top 5, borderline top 5 QB in this league, and he's getting his weapons back with Irving and Chris Godwin this week. So it'll be good for him this week coming up. Number 5, I have Lamar Jackson. Look, Lamar didn't have the greatest week. And speaking for just weeks in general, this week for quarterbacks, all these quarterbacks kind of put up a stinker this week. Like, they were all not very good. Maybe not necessarily all of them. There's a couple of them that had good weeks, but a majority of them were not very good. Lamar Jackson had a couple of really bad interceptions, a couple of tip balls that were picks, but he didn't have a good week. And the Browns defense the Browns defense at home is like historically good this year. So, Lamar just didn't have a very good week this week. A lot of these guys didn't. I got him at number 5 against Cleveland. Number 4, I had Pat Mahomes. Big time spot for the Chiefs. Didn't end up pulling off the win. He did have an interception in that game. Just, again, as I mentioned with the Chiefs, I mentioned it yesterday in my video, the Chiefs just kind of look old, and not Pat Mahomes doesn't look old, but I just think the team around him just isn't necessarily helping him much at all, to be honest with you. So, look, Mahomes, I think he's still playing great. He's still a top 5 QB, but he has thrown kind of some really bad interceptions this year. I will say that for Pat Mahomes. Against the Broncos this week, look, that Broncos defense is just a top-notch unit. Divisional game, a lot on the line, and usually Patrick Mahomes comes through in this spot, and he just didn't this week. So, I don't know if it's necessarily all on him, but the team in general just kind of didn't come through. I was pretty shocked there. Chiefs didn't end up pulling off that win, and Mahomes didn't either. Number 3, I have Josh Allen. Look, he had 6 touchdowns in total against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 3 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns. Pretty fantastic performance. Josh Allen, over the last couple of weeks, hasn't been great. He's had some inconsistencies this season. Had a game against the Falcons where it was kind of a total dud. Last week against Miami, didn't look good at all. Had one of the worst interceptions of his career in that game. And this week against the Bucs, he started off like 5 for 11 with 2 picks. So was kind of looking like it was trending in that direction of being another one of those games that was just like, what the hell is this guy doing? So ended up getting 6 touchdowns by the end of the game. That is a Josh Allen stat line right there, with 3 rushing touchdowns and 3 passing touchdowns, and ended up pulling off a much-needed win to keep them in the AFC East race, not 3 games behind New England. Well, for what would kind of feel like a Broncos situation in the AFC West, like New England could lock this up in a couple of weeks, to be honest with you. So the Bills are staying alive in that race there. Number 2, I have Drake May. Look, leading in the MVP race right now. The only thing I have with Drake May is when they get to January, kind of the same thing I have with Caleb. It's like if Caleb can end up getting to the playoffs, which the Bears have a couple of rough games coming up as well. If New England can end up getting to the playoffs, which most likely they will, they have some pretty easy games coming up these next couple weeks for the bye and end off with a pretty easy slate of games as well. They have like a game against Baltimore and Buffalo again, but that's really it there. But it's just really, is he going to be able to pull off what he's doing now in January in Buffalo, in the divisional round or the wild card round or even the AFC Championship? Maybe if Kansas City gets there, in Denver, like whatever it is can they end up pulling that off, and can Drake May stay composed and poised in those moments? That's my only concern there with Drake May. But besides that, he's been one of the best dual threat QBs in the league. best deep ball thrower in the league. Just fantastic all over the board, and him and the Patriots have really made a lot of progress. Number one, I have Matt Stafford, again, staying on the top of the list right now. I don't think he's the MVP favorite this week, but if he is, well-deserved. Him and May, again, you can flip-flop them both. It doesn't really matter to me. Just Stafford in terms of his experience all over the board, playoffs, Super Bowl, regular season. He's just, I have to give it to him over May right now. It's the way he's been passing, it looks so comfortable. The whole team looks comfortable, and he's a big reason for that. He's just, well, there's not too much to say about Stafford besides, to me, he's the best QB in the league, best passing QB in the league right now, especially. He's just making that offense look pretty incredible, like historically good, to be honest with you. So, especially he's building that connection with Devontae Adams, which is pretty important. They were kind of off to a slow start at the beginning of the season, but they've looked great so far. So that is it for my top 10 QBs. A couple of topics I just wanted to touch on really, really quick is the Jets benching Justin Fields. Look, that was kind of just coming. We all knew it was coming. The offense. Now, in Justin Fields' defense, I actually didn't think he played bad against New England on Thursday Night Football. A.D. Mitchell had some really bad drops in that game, like really bad drops that ended up making Justin Fields look a lot worse. He actually threw some pretty deep balls that ended up getting dropped. That's kind of been the story for Justin Fields all year. It's like, hey, these receivers are dropping balls, or I'm just getting sacked like crazy. Now, a lot of those sacks, though, he doesn't get that ball off fast enough. For a guy who's like 4 or 5 years in his career and doesn't know how to hit his first read and just doesn't see the field as well, it's very concerning. Look, they paid this guy like 2 years, $40 million. You kind of expect better out of him, to be honest with you, and they're just not winning games. While I don't think all of it's his fault, I just don't think the Jets are very good in general. I think there's definitely some cause for concern there with Justin Fields' career. Now, I will say how he was coming out of Ohio State when I thought he'd be with the Jets, and like, hey, for the first time in his career, like, or not the first time, but he had pig hands in the Steelers last year, which when he was put in a good situation, Justin Fields was actually pretty good. When he was like 3-0 or 3-1 last year or something like that. And I thought the Steelers were going to end up keeping Justin Fields this season, and they didn't. They ended up moving on to Aaron Rodgers. Right now, it looks like the good move, but who knows if Justin Fields ended up staying in Pittsburgh. Maybe they'd be better. You never know. New York Jets is just is an organization where careers go to die, to be honest with you. And I think that's one of them right there with Fields. I thought him maybe pairing up with Garrett Wilson would end up kind of, unlocking that Ohio State connection. They'd end up kind of being fun to watch, but Wilson's on IR. The team's just trending in the wrong direction, and I think them starting Tyrod Taylor, look, they're desperate. They want to get some sort of wins, and maybe Aaron Glenn kind of feels like his career's on the ropes. Maybe he could be one and done in New York. I don't necessarily know. Look, I'm not within the organization. I'm not saying I agree with it per se, but look, and then maybe he feels like his job's on the line here. And look, you kind of watched that New England game and the Jets game last week. I actually thought Justin Fields played pretty good. The receivers just dropped almost every good pass he threw them, to be honest with you. Mitchell was responsible for a good bit of them. And, that's just kind of what I thought there with Fields. I feel for him a bit. The athletic ability's there. There's no doubt about that. And I think there is some use for him in the NFL in terms of him maybe being a gadget guy, a goal line guy, a guy who can come in to really, hey, you line him up next to your running back. Like, this guy can be a great gadget guy and be a backup somewhere in the league. There's no doubt he's at least backup caliber in this league, but in terms of being a starter in this league, his career may be done in terms of being a starter for Fields. I feel for him, but you go to the Jets, you have to take what you can get in terms of being a starter, but that's where just careers go to die. Whether or not Fields, his career is set in stone, it's over. Whether or not it's over, it's not looking good for him right now. And the Jets, again, are desperate. Maybe Aaron Glenn's desperate to keep his job. I don't necessarily know what's going on there, but I think anyone who's been kind of watching him knows that he hasn't been great all year. Look, he may not be turning the ball over, but he misses a lot of throws and takes a lot of sacks. And I mentioned the New England game wasn't necessarily all his fault, but a majority of the year, he just does not look good, to be honest with you. So that's my thoughts on that. And real quick about the Penix injury. Kirk Cousins has to come in and start for the rest of the year. The Falcons were cooked anyway. And for Penix, look, it wasn't kind of looking good for his future anyway. There in Atlanta, they were definitly going to end up giving him another year next year. They are anyway. But between all the injury issues Penix has had in college, Hopefully it doesn't start lingering with him with the NFL. The Falcons are going to have a hard time signing this guy to a big deal. Between his play, just hasn't been great. He's looked good in moments, but he really just hasn't looked good for a majority of times he's played anyway. And I don't necessarily blame it all on him. I think between him and Raheem Morris, he went on the podium the other day and said he doesn't really feel a connection with his coaches or anything like that. Like he feels like he needs help, but he's not getting it. It's like the Raheem Morris era in an era, if you want to call it an era, is over in Atlanta. Like, I'm surprised he's not fired already, but if he ends up making it through the rest of the season, it's done for him anyway. So I think Penix will get a fresh start, and it sucks because he dealt with a lot of injuries in college and big time injuries as well. He's having season-ending knee surgery. That's a pretty big surgery and a pretty big injury to have. So hopefully that doesn't start lingering for him, because that was kind of the main concern with Penix coming out of the draft. It was like, well, we think this guy can play, but it's like, can he get away from the injuries? It's kind of been the opposite so far. That his play hasn't necessarily been great, but he's actually been able to play. The injuries hasn't been an issue, but he's actually kind of started to play a little bit better. He was actually playing good in that Carolina game, and then he gets injured. So hopefully it kind of wasn't a turnaround to where like, hey, Penix kind of comes in, he actually looks good, but he gets injured every 4 weeks now. So we'll have to see there, but that's a blow for them and the Falcons. Look, the Falcons season was over anyway, but definitely sucks there for the Falcons or Michael Penix. I feel for him. Hopefully next year he can come back with a new coaching staff, which is looking like that's going to be the case, and really find a way to get a groove in his career. And the Falcons players in general don't have to suffer anymore, and the fans like London, Bijan, Pitts, like you have a lot of talent. Darnell Mooney, to suck that bad. So, we will definitely see next year. That's all I got for today. Hope you guys enjoyed Top 10 Tuesday. I'll be back tomorrow with Why Not Wednesday. Everyone, see you on the next one. Take it easy.